You've spoken about following your bliss, and you love that phrase. How are you to follow your bliss if it is destructive to other people? Now, by that, I'm thinking of...
Where do you get this stuff? Following bliss,
Yes.
that is not our terminology. We were quoting Joseph Campbell,
Right.
but we think it is a wonderful phrase. Following your bliss, the way we would define it, means that through life you've become this. And in the vortex, that's bliss. It's clear-minded. It's alignment. And when you move in the direction of that and you close that gap, that is bliss. And we can see no possibility of someone inside the vortex ever causing negative impact on anyone. So what did you mean?
That's what I'm talking about. I think that sometimes the feeling of bliss can be masked as something else. I'm thinking of the pyromaniac or the child molester who really feel alive and full when they're engaging those behaviors.
But you see what you're talking about, and we're talking about degrees of alignment, is that by the time we have a discussion and you have an experience of moving your way into the vortex, we promise you no one from inside the vortex would ever offer any of those kinds of behaviors. Those are all outside the vortex behaviors. And why are they so dramatic? Because through a long life of struggle, this follows perfectly with what we were talking about just now. Through a long life of all of that chaos and struggle and trauma, you have put so much into your vibrational reality. And the more you put into your vibrational reality and the more you hold back from it, the worse you feel. So I feel terrible, which makes me ask to feel better. The larger part of me does have that expansion and involvement, but I don't go. Now the contrast is greater, so I ask harder. And so I become more, but I still don't go, until eventually the trauma of not keeping up with who I am becomes so unpleasant or overwhelming or unbearable that there is some sort of lashing out. And why is that? Now, think about this. You're an advanced group of people. You can handle this conversation. So, do you accept that the vortex is the culmination of all that you have expanded and become, and that it is, by law of attraction, calling you? It's that stream that we were talking about. It's calling you, it's calling you, it's calling you. And can you accept that when you go, you feel better, and when you don't go, you feel worse? Because you've become something that you must be, and when you croak, you'll be it. But meanwhile, you can hold yourself apart from it. So, let's say you're in despair. Let's say you've been mistreated for as long as you can remember, and you feel utterly powerless. And Source is calling you. And as we said earlier, here's this vortex, and when you're in despair, you can't hear it. You can't hear the bliss that you're being called to. You can't hear the love and worthiness and clarity and well-being and friskiness that you're being called to. But you're hearing something. And as you gravitate in the natural direction to close the gap, the next logical step is revenge. Because despair is utter powerlessness, and revenge is more control, more empowerment. So, speaking as Source, we would rather see you in revenge than in powerlessness. Now, your society would ban us if they ever had the power to do it for such a statement, because they're still out there trying to, outside the vortex, trying to sort everything into piles of right and wrong. They haven't been in the vortex enough to know the power and the clarity and the love and the value of being in the vortex. But we have, so we'll call you into revenge, and then into anger, and then into frustration, and eventually into hope. We'll call you right into the vortex. It's natural that you come that way. So these conversations, many people say that when they hear us talking about how you create your own reality. They say, oh, we don't want people to create their own reality, because what about those mass murderers, those pyromaniacs? What about those terrible child molesters? What about those people that do those bad things to those other people? We don't want them creating their own reality. They might create a reality that we don't want them to create. And we say, first of all, you have no choice, because you cannot get inside of them and offer their own vibration. Only they can. But next of all, You have to understand that this is a diverse world and everyone wants to feel good. And so we would just put these horrendous acts that you've offered here as someone's trek up the emotional scale who did not make it into the vortex. And there are a lot of, we said to you earlier, all politics is outside of the vortex. Almost all religion is outside of the vortex. You rarely meet someone unless they're newly born or have feathers or fur who is consistently inside the vortex, you see. Most humans struggle in their outside the vortex stuff. And that's why you have endless conversations and endless seminars and endless books and endless trying to sort it all out. That's why we say you have one responsibility and one responsibility only. Get in the vortex and begin to approach life from inside the vortex and feel the power and the leverage of that, you see. So if someone says, I created horrendous acts and I liked it, what they're saying is, it felt better for me to do something bad to you than for you to do something bad to me. And we say, relatively speaking, we don't blame you, because blame always feels better than guilt. But that's not the conversation we're having here today. We're not here encouraging people into revenge. We're here encouraging people through revenge, on their way to anger, on their way up the emotional scale, on their way into the vortex, you see.
I guess I was just questioning that internal guide that points you toward bliss. Can we always trust that?
You can, but you've got to get a bead on it, you see. And what happens with so many is that they move from despair into revenge, and then society trounces on them for their bad act, and then they go back to despair and powerlessness. This emotional scale where feeling wonderful at one end, love and bliss, and what that feeling is, the basis of that feeling is self-empowerment. It's being in alignment with who you are. It's closing that gap. It's being all that I am. And at the other end of that is the exact opposite of that, you see, disempowerment. The only thing that you can fill that gap with is alignment. People drink, they shoot drugs, they eat drugs, they drink alcohol, they go to the store and buy one more thing and bring it home. There are all kinds of ways that people attempt to fill the gap, but there's only one way you can, and that's by coming into alignment with who you really are.
Thank you.
Very good. That's a big conversation, isn't it? How often do you hear of the man who took his father's gun and went into the whatever and shot a bunch of people? How often do you hear how mistreated he was as a child? In other words, something happened to him. He got that habit of thought stuck in his vibrational craw, and now he is acting from his place of disempowerment. And so we would like to say to the leaders of your world, to the leaders of your organization, to the doctors and scientists, to the psychologists and psychiatrists, to the teachers, we'd like to say to anyone who wants to help anyone, you cannot punish someone into the vortex. You cannot blame them into the vortex. You cannot condemn them or judge them inappropriate into the vortex. Those are all techniques that assure that they will stay out of the vortex. You love them into the vortex. You understand them in. You recognize who they really are. You get a bead on the source within them. You let the contrast that they show you let you know the part of them that you don't want, which helps you to define the part of them that you do want. And then you train yourself to see the part of them that they most are. And when you focus upon who they really are, not who they're being in this moment, there is not a mass murderer among you who inside is not a pure positive energy being. They're just very far from who they are. They've been trained outside of who they are, you see. And while you punish them in every way you can, as you find them abhorrent to your society, it is our promise to you that when they make their death experience, there is not death, there's only eternal life, but when they have that withdrawal from the physical experience, and they will, you all do, they will reemerge into pure positive energy, and they will again be the being that their life has caused them to be. And that's upsetting to a lot of physical beings because they want the punishment to go on. They punished them for their behavior while they were out here outside the vortex, and they would like them to be punished for all time and all eternity. But it is our promise to you that the only punishment that ever happens here in human physical form, and it's when you hold yourself vibrationally apart from who you have become. You just can't get around it. All pain and suffering is self-inflicted. And while it's often influenced, and we know there's plenty of blame to go around, no one can vibrate for you. You are doing it all yourself, you see. So if you're wanting to help your planet be a better place, look at those that you see as the biggest renegades and try to find within you a clear vision of who they really are, and give your undivided attention to who they really are until you revel in the wholeness of who they are and watch them rise to the level of your expectation. Because one who is inside the vortex is more powerful than a million who are not. When you were sick and you stood before the one you know as Jesus, dripping your illness, he did not see your illness. Instead, he knew your wellness. He was inside your vibrational vortex where he knew the perfection of the well-being that was yours. And he knew the exaggerated desire that was yours in the moment of your illness. And he focused completely, in a non-resistant way, upon the wellness of your being. And in doing so, your illness could not abide in that vibration. It vanished because of the influence of his knowing of who you are. It doesn't take many of you. The handful of people who are in this room, you could focus upon the solutions that you seek, and this small gathering would be enough to influence a change in experience, in creation upon this planet.